Shit's gone sideways.
Awesome. Well, Brett Connellan. I got it right.
Yeah,
Yes.
nailed it.
Thank God.
That's rare, but you got there.
Thanks for coming on Shit's Gone Sideways.
Man, thanks for having me.
Whereabouts did you grow up?
I was born in Sydney, but moved to a little south coast town called Connellan when I was 3 years old.
Yep.
So to answer that question, it's probably easier just to leave the Sydney part out and just say
Kiama.
Kiama. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And so we were just talking about that before we started recording. Just the reason why you're here now is because I finally got a research assistant, which has been a very exciting development for Shit's Gone Sideways, and just given me the opportunity to try and explore other people's stories. And yours was the first one on the list, and it jumped out at me, and I was like, this guy's got to come on. So, thank you for responding to my DM.
It's the way to do it these days, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know, if you're used to bloody middle-aged blokes hitting up in your DMs, or usually it's pretty ladies, but...
It happens more often than I probably care to admit.
Awesome, man. So, what was life like growing up in Kiama? Did you go to school around there?
Yeah, so I went to school around there. I mean, growing up in a little town like that, I think it's probably carbon copy for most people you talk to from there. Like,
Yep.
in and around the ocean, and like it's funny that it used to be with Kiama, it was like the home of like newlyweds and nearly dead. So it was just like retirement village and then all these young families and nothing in between.
Okay.
So it's kind of been interesting. There was a lot of young people around when I grew up, but as they kind of got older, they realized that there was kind of a bit of a limit on what was available in the area because
Not
it was
much.
catered towards just old people. Like there's just a retirement village and a couple of fish and chip shops and stuff like that.
So what, they found it a bit slow or boring?
Yeah, exactly. So what ended up happening is I guess a lot of people move away, but the thing that always kept me there was the ocean and surfing. I started surfing when I was 11, but I've been in the ocean for a long time before that. Dad got me into nippers when I was very young, just to be in and around the ocean. And I was on a bodyboard for years up until he finally convinced me to ditch the bodyboard and stand up instead.
Have you got siblings?
I've got two sisters, one older and one younger.
Yep. Did they ever get into surfing?
Both of them have at certain points. My older sister's definitely more into it than my younger sister. But I guess that was the cool thing when I look back on my childhood is surfing was something that we all did. Like my dad did it through his entire life. He grew up in Cronulla and it was a big part of his life. And it's something that he took to us when we were younger. But even my mum took it up at some stage, and she's from Melbourne originally. So
wow, the whole surfing family.
Yeah, exactly. Which is really cool. Like surfing's nice like that because it's something that you can share with other people.
Yeah.
I mean, in one way or another. Like I on the other side of the coin always talk about how selfish surfing can be as well, because for me being very competitive and chasing that pathway, to try and make it as a professional, it really did become more selfish because it was just about me, my goals, and wanting to go out there and be the best and get the best waves and all of this. But I guess at the base of it, when I look at what got me into surfing in the first place, it was that community and being around my family and all those sorts of things, which is a much nicer way to surf, I think.
Yeah, sure. So you're talking about there's the difference between the pointy end of it when you're competitive, and then there's just the purity of it, right, and just enjoying it for what it is.
Yeah.
And, can really be a sense of community around it.
Definitely. And they're two very different worlds. There's for the amount of people that do surf, and it's not like it's a massive sport. Like it's obviously pretty big in Australia, but still compared to the population, there's not a huge amount of people that surf. And there's a very small percentage of those people that do it competitively.
Yep.
So it is a very different world that, I mean, the whole professional surfing thing, it definitely intrigued me from a young age. I guess you look at the guys who get to do it professionally, and it looks like the best job ever.
It looks amazing.
You get to travel around, like you're going all over the world. There's the scene that's associated with it, like there's the parties.
They're tan, they're fit, they get hot chicks, they're
Exactly.
loaded, they travel the world. It looks like the dream.
I know, and that's the thing. As a young person, like, what do you want to do when you're at school? Like, focus on doing maths and knowing you're going to be an accountant, or you want to like look at something like that. So that was really interesting for me for a very long time, was to have something like that to aim towards, because it did seem like such an amazing lifestyle. But on the other side of that, at the time when I first started looking at it, there were 44 guys on tour. Now there's 34. So there's basically...
What does that mean?
such a small percentage of the population that get to do it at the highest level.
Yeah, okay.
So although I had these dreams of becoming professional, whether that was going to happen or not is that's a completely different mountain to climb and something that takes a long time to figure out.
Yeah, sure. What's the surf like in Kiama?
The waves are good. Like I've spent a lot of time surfing all over Australia and all over the world, and I honestly think we probably get some of the best waves that I've had in my life there. There's other places which people would consider the waves being better, like say the Gold Coast and things like that. And I've spent a lot of time there. I've lived there for a year and a half when I was doing uni, and I think the waves are more consistently above average there. But when the waves get really good, I don't think it really beats, Kiama and the South Coast. And there's something just about the raw power and the type of waves that you get down there that it's pretty difficult to find anywhere else unless you go really remote.
That's pretty handy that you had that in your backyard growing up.
Yeah, definitely. Right? And well, yes and no, because when you're surfing in competitions, that's not really what the waves are like. You surf a lot of waves in Sydney, like Cronulla and Manly and all those sorts of things, and then up and down the coast where the waves aren't really like that. So, yeah, it's an advantage because it's great fun and you get to surf good waves, but it doesn't really...
It's not the right training ground for competitive level. Okay.
No, and that's kind of always been a bit of an issue with a lot of the surfers from the South Coast that I know of, where it's kind of twofold. You surf in the waves that don't really correlate to competitions, but then you don't get the same attention from sponsors and things like that down there because it's just a smaller market that they kind of get left to the side a little bit. And that's its own little, I suppose, barrier to overcome. But everyone always celebrates surfers that come from down there. Like there's guys like Owen Wright, who's just retired last year, who had a really successful career on tour, and everyone from around home backs people like that because it's just great to see someone succeed.
Yeah, someone from your own backyard.
Yeah,
of course you'd champion them.
Of course.
So what were you getting into an age where you were starting to compete at a lower level?
Yeah, so the way that the competitive like surfing circuit thing works when you're younger is basically you do junior comps up until the age of 16.
Yep.
And then from 16 to 18, they have what's called the Pro Juniors, which is just like kind of the elite competitions for those age surfers. And then from then on, it goes into the WQS, so the World Qualifying Series, and they go up and you can surf at those in any age really. But
how do comps work in terms of like what do you have to do to win?
Yeah, and that's the confusing thing about surfing. And I got asked this question the other week, and it kind of caught me by surprise because I don't often really have to explain it, but how it works, basically it works in heats. So you'll be surfing against 3 other people. So it's 4-person heats, especially when you're younger. When it gets into the more elite stuff, it's just 2 people in a heat. But you have 20 minutes and your best 2 waves count towards your overall score. And each wave is scored out of 10. So the perfect wave, if you manage to get that in that 20 minutes, is a 10-point ride. And basically if you stand up and don't get to your feet, or you fall off straight away, that's like close to a 0. So it can range anywhere in between there. The problem with surfing though is it's not like you have to do a specific amount of things or a specific trick on a wave. It's really up to the judges to decide what they see as good surfing. And that is what I think gets a lot of people offside when they start looking into what surfing is and how they can follow it, because it doesn't really make sense to a lot of people. Like what one person can constitute as good surfing, another person may not agree. And that's confusing, but I think that's also what makes it kind of the sport.
Is there 3 judges?
So there's 3 judges in the lower level stuff, and then they go up to 5 in the more elite things. So yeah, even if one person doesn't like the way that you surf, there's a chance that someone else might, and they average those scores.
Sure.
out.
I mean, that's the same with boxing, right? Sometimes you see these three judges' scorecards, and you're like, sometimes there's a wild variation between the 3 of them, and you're like, were these people watching the same fucking fight?
Yeah, exactly.
So I imagine you could have the similar variation with surfing.
Definitely.
Or even more so.
Yeah, it can be, but I guess at least it does average out in the end. And the brutal thing about surf competitions is, and my dad used to always say that he doesn't know how I'd put up with it for so long, but it's really cutthroat. Like at the end of the day, there's only one winner, and each round half of the field goes home. So I guess it's a little bit like tennis in that way, where you match up against one person, and then after each round, half of the field is gone. And that's 20 minutes that you got to spend doing it. And you might go 6 hours up the coast for 20 minutes, and then you have to drive all the way back home.
Yeah, feeling like shit the whole way home.
Exactly. It's not, and
it's a long drive.
There's been plenty of those car rides, trust me.
I talk to people that travel like a couple of hours to do a comedy gig for 10 minutes, and if they bomb, like it's a long drive home.
Oh,
right?
definitely, yeah. A lot of head noise.
Yeah. So So you were doing these competitions from being in your teens, and were you thinking, were you going well in the competitions?
To be honest, I didn't have much success when I was younger. My surfing came on a little bit later, so I went through like those junior events and had decent results, but nothing outstanding. There's always a bunch of kids in that age group which are put on the pedestal, and they're like, these are going to be the next generation, and it's really hard to break into that. And I didn't really have the results to get there, but as I progressed, and especially once I finished school, that's when it started to come along a lot for me. And I finished school and was kind of at a bit of a crossroads, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Like, I didn't want to jump into a career. I didn't really want to commit to 4 years of uni, but I wanted to keep myself around surfing, kind of keep my options open. I knew I always wanted a job in surfing if the professional thing didn't work out. So I actually found a course at Southern Cross Uni, which is a surfing studies course. And that's what moved me up to the Gold Coast. So, like, I know the question is, like, what does that involve, all of that? It is
smoking
a
lot
thing.
of weed.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea of that was just to give me an idea, like, how it works. It basically gives you a bunch of different aspects of the surfing industry. Like, you'll do marketing, events management, and all these sorts of things.
So surfing is a business, right?
Yes. Yeah, and then you'll figure out what way you want to go
into
after
it.
that.
Okay.
So the main reason I wanted to do that, it wasn't necessarily to really dive deep into what I wanted to do, but it was, I had a year to move out of home up onto the Gold Coast, where the surfing scene is well, that's kind of the mecca in Australia for it anyway. So gets you closer to some contacts and things like that. And I wanted to compete while I was up there and just do something a little bit different. And when I finished my the surfing studies course, I ended up moving back home because I couldn't stand how many people were up there in the water. The crowds are crazy compared to home.
Yeah, wow.
So
the waves are good, but there's just so many bloody people that you head in.
Exactly.
You're used to all the space you had in Kiama.
Yeah, exactly. So I decided to move back home, and that point in time was when my surfing really started taking off. I got a lot of confidence from surfing on the Gold Coast and realizing that when I was comparing myself to a lot of the other people up there, then you start to stand out a little bit. And when I moved back home, I devised a bit of a plan of what I wanted to do with my surfing. Like, I'd already had a look at the career path there, but I really wanted to give it one last crack competitively and say, I want to line up a few events this year. I want to do everything I can to give myself the best chance at success. So, like, I got myself a PT. I was following like a training program. I was working on my nutrition, working on heat strategy, all these sorts of things, because I kind of arrived at a point where I was like, I just don't want to look back when I'm like 40 or 50 years old and be like, should I have tried?
Start wondering, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
so you started to treat yourself more like a performance athlete.
Yeah.
Right. And also, I mean, that's the stuff out of the water. Was there anything? Did you notice your technical skills and surf skills improving in any way?
There was that. I always had a lot of confidence in my surfing, but a big thing when it comes to having success competitively is knowing how to do it. There's a big difference between someone who goes out there for 20 minutes and surfs and someone who goes out there for 20 minutes and surfs a heat strategically. And that was something that I really started to learn there, and that's what brought me a little bit more success.
How do you learn that part?
A lot of trial and error, basically, and figuring out how it works with timing, because there's a lot of luck involved. And when it comes to surfing strategically, you're trying to take as much of that luck out of the heat as possible. And that can be very difficult to do, because you can do everything right and you just don't get the waves. But what you're trying to do is give yourself the best chance. And sometimes that can mean that you're trying to time out when you catch your wave. So you might try and get some quick ones earlier in the heat if you know it's going to be slow, and then that kind of puts you in command and puts some pressure on the other person. And, if you do go behind in a heat, how do you try and put yourself in a position to catch up? And they're all things that I had no idea on how to do when I was younger.
Sure.
And that was really the difference as I started getting a little bit older and a little bit more mature. And I guess that lined up with my surfing kind of catching up to that point as well.
Sure. So it sounds like you're talking more about just improving your surfing IQ or your surfing brain, more than just like not only getting on the board but picking how to battle on it.
Yeah, and that's something I hadn't really considered up until that point. Well, I hadn't really needed it just because I was surfing when I was younger because I loved it.
Yeah.
And then as you work out if you have a goal that you want to succeed competitively, you kind of have to figure out how to do that. And that's just one of the major factors that you've got to try and overcome. So that was in 2015 that I'd made that goal, and I'd kind of started working all these things. And
Did that excite you?
It did massively, because it was probably the first time I could feel myself gaining a lot more confidence that I could actually do it. And because I had all these events planned out, I started doing a few local events to kind of just put myself in those situations, and had a lot of success in the local events. And I was feeling really confident. And there was one specific event, which wasn't actually an individual competition, it was a teams competition. It was called the Board Riders Battle, which is basically where you live will have a board riders club that you surf with, and that has monthly competitions. And this event was kind of like it brought all the board riders clubs in the area together to compete against each other. And our club has always been a very small kind of underdog club, and we ended up winning the first event that we'd won in 30 or 40 years. And it was a massive achievement, and that qualified us for the national final.
That's cool.
Where we ended up coming 6th in that, which was a huge achievement for us at that time. And in the national final, that's when you surf against some of the best surfers in Australia. And there were a couple heats there where I really held my own against some of the best, and was kind of really proud with how I went and how the team went in that event. And that was where I was like supreme confidence in the year upcoming. I'd got these events planned, and that was in late January that was all going on.
It must be pretty cool when you'd like put this plan in place to develop your I guess your body for competing, and then also your surfing IQ, and then you're doing this stuff and you're holding your own against these guys that are considered the big fish of it, right? And you're thinking like, this is realistic. Like, I'm not crazy.
Yeah. And I guess that speaks to why you put that effort in the first place. And I'd never really focused on anything like that before. And there's definitely a lot to be said about, when it really starts with a goal, and then all those other things kind of come behind that. I wasn't being so like direct about knowing that's what was happening, and this is something that's kind of I've realized later on, especially with some of the other experiences I've had in life. But that was a really cool feeling, like you said, it kind of validates what you're doing and what you're there for.
Yeah, I've certainly felt that with some of the kind of awesome big opportunities that I've already had with comedy, where I'm thinking like, this is crazy, but like, no, I've actually put in the work, so much work to get here. Like I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
And it's a cool feeling. And sometimes you can be dismissive of the fact that like, no, this has all come because you deserve it because you put in the work.
Yeah, it's something I really struggled with for a long time. Is I think the word that a lot of people kind of shy away from is pride. I always had a really difficult relationship with pride and saying that I was proud of the work that I was putting in, because it seems weird to kind of up yourself like that.
Yeah, it can come across, or you feel in your head at least that it seems like arrogance.
Yeah, but I think what it does, it just, and it depends on what you have pride in, I guess, but I would always look at, and this is something that I do now very much so, is to look at what you actually do to try and achieve a goal. Like I really try and set the expectations of what happens at the end to the side. And if I can be proud of the stuff I do every single day to try and get there, that's what counts for me. And that's what you mentioned just before for yourself. And like on the way down today, and I stopped off to do a run, which I didn't really need to do on a busy day like today. But the reason I stopped is because I am doing a 50K trail run in 4 weeks' time. And it's part of my training plan. And I know that whether it doesn't matter how I do on the day of the run, but at least I can look back and be like, well, I did that difficult trail run the day when I was busy doing speaking and being in the car. And I think that's where the whole pride thing kind of comes in. And it makes a ton of sense to me anyway.
Absolutely. The preparation piece is key. And so that's awesome. So what happens now? So you're going down this path. It looks like the future looks bright. and then what happens?
So things are going good. I think I mentioned the timeline. So that was late January, early February, those events and all that confidence was kind of coming through. March 30th was the day that it all changed.
So this is
2016.
2016, yep.
2016. March 30th, 2016 is the day that it all changed. And it's... I mean, I look back on that day, and I guess we're going to get into talking about the shark attack itself. But The day itself was just a regular day. I mean, I get asked a lot about, like, was there anything about the day that you knew? And it's like,
No.
you can't find meaning in those sorts of things.
Totally.
They're just regular days that irregular things can happen on.
Yeah.
But this day essentially derailed all the plans that I had as far as surfing competitively and changed my life as I knew it. You know, the day I got attacked by a shark is always going to be that day I look to that changed my life forever.
Yeah. So you were surfing. What time of day was it?
Late afternoon. So I'd surfed after work. I'd had a fairly average day at work, and it's funny, I always not always, but from time to time I come across people that'll be like, oh, what are you surfing in the afternoon for? And for me, it's normal. Like I worked, and it was the only time of day that I really had an opportunity.
What do they mean by that question?
Like,
Well,
I think everyone, you know, people do get warned that the heightened risk time of days for sharks and shark attacks are dawn and dusk. And I think a lot of people take that as if you go in the water, you're 100% going to get attacked by a shark.
Right.
But it's really just it's an added risk factor. It's like driving at night, right?
I mean, how many surfers are in the water at dawn to dusk every
Well, that's
right?
Well, and that's the thing. It's the best time to surf, so it's the most enticing. It's when there's no wind, and usually the conditions are the best. So that is the time of day to surf. And plus, like, I didn't really have any other options. Like I was working throughout the day. That's how I essentially was decompressing from a bad day. And some people, you know, they'll go home and spend time with the kids. Other people go to the gym. Like that was my way of decompressing after
Some
a
go
bad
to the pub.
day.
You know?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that was late afternoon. I decided to go for a surf. So I finished work at like 5. Takes me 40 minutes to drive home. So it's kind of close to 6 p.m. by the time I paddle out. On the way home, I messaged my good mate Joel and tell him that I'm going to go for a surf. And he's the only person that I actually messaged that afternoon, just kind of randomly. And I often message him. It's not like it was out of the blue, but I messaged him as I left work and said, I'm going for a surf out Bombo Beach. And the reason I said as I was leaving work is because Joel's one of my least reliable mates, and I know he's going to be late for everything if he decides to actually show up.
So give him advance warning.
Yeah, he's one of those friends. So I got down to the beach and I paddled straight out. 30 minutes later, Joel shows up. So it kind of says a little bit about how his timekeeping is. The thing is, like, I've been mates with Joel for a long time. His thing's always like, yeah, I'm just putting a load of washing on and then I'll come down. I'm like, are you sitting there watching the washing go around in the machine? Like,
you should have messaged him at lunchtime.
Yeah, that would have been a better time. I mean, in the end, he was there at the right time anyway. But so Joel paddles out. We're surfing together for probably about 20, 30 minutes. And the waves are really fun. It's actually a really nice afternoon. There's not many, you know, it's nice sort of sunset, beautiful afternoon. It's obviously that time of year, like late March, it's starting to get a little bit cooler as the sun goes down. So like I can remember that stuff perfectly. And Joel gets a wave. Like we were just kind of sharing waves together for a while, and Joel gets a wave and he's probably about 100, 150 meters further down the beach. And I'm sitting out the back waiting for the next set. And I'm actually kind of just looking around, like reflecting on the day I'd had, like being like, I had a pretty shit day at work, but at least I've been able to come out and go for a surf and have a chat to a mate and feeling a lot better. Like looking back at the sunset, like things are all, like I can remember all these really fine details right up until the moment that I get hit from my right side. Yeah. And the way I describe that impact, I mean, I've, you know, used the words, you know, felt like getting hit by a bus. I guess it's like, you know, a big footy tackle or something like that, because I get hit from my right side and get thrown off my surfboard. And I land in the water, and before I can even look around to see what it was or what happened, this shark has swum around to the other side of me and he's biting me on the left leg. So I look down, and that's the first thing that I see.
Yeah, holy shit. So the first hit was just impact. It was just bumping
yeah.
you into the water.
And there's reason to that. Sharks don't have hands, so that's kind of like a test to see what it is. So because they don't have hands and they can't like pick things up and feel them, they test by running into them. Some of them test by biting them, but that's what that first impact was.
Holy shit! Yeah.
But this moment when I'm looking down is one of, there's probably like 3 key moments throughout that experience, which are all equally as terrifying as each other. And the first one is like looking down and seeing your worst nightmares, like it's happening. There's this moment where the reality of that situation, it kind of just hits you like a ton of bricks, and time slows down to the point of stopping, and you're looking down at this thing. And the interesting thing about that moment is, as time's slowing down, you can take in all these like really fine details of what's happening in front of you. So I guess what was like a 5-second period to me felt like 5 minutes, and I can remember all these really vivid details.
What were you noticing?
So first of all is the feel of the shark's skin. So it's really kind of rough.
How big was it?
So that's you've gone straight to the big question there. I didn't have my tape measure on me at the time, but I found out
fucking big.
Yeah, well, I found out later on from some people that can measure the distance between teeth marks and can kind of estimate the size of the shark. They said it was between 2.5 to 3 meters. So
wow.
Pretty solid.
Big ass shark.
Yeah. So yeah, solid. Big enough anyway. So I can remember the feel of the shark's skin. I can remember the fact that there was just no sound. And this was a strange one to remember and to recount, because like I found out later on I'm screaming for help. That doesn't register with me. I can't hear the splashing of the water. And obviously a shark doesn't make noise. It's not like you're getting attacked by a bear or something like that, and you're going to hear something like a shark.
There was no Jaws music?
No, exactly. No Jaws music. Nothing like that. And then the other thing I can remember is like this visual impact of like looking at the shark in the eyes. And the scary thing about that is when you're eye to eye with the shark, you realize that this is something that you can't communicate with. Like you can't tell it to stop, and you can't reason with it. You're just at the mercy of whatever it's going to do. And I guess the scary thing about that's for me as a surfer, that's my worst nightmare, is coming to fruition right in front of me, and there's just nothing that you can do. You're
completely powerless.
100%.
Were you able to identify like what kind of shark it was?
Yeah, so I found out later on after kind of matching up what I saw and then what actually happened, because it came back a second time that it was a bull shark.
Yeah.
They roughly identified it as a great white, but they really rely on input from the person who's been in the experience to identify what it is. And that kind of, I guess that leads us perfectly to the second kind of scary moment of that, which is when it came back the second time. So I made the mistake, and I say the mistake because apparently you're not meant to do this, but I mean, what would you do what's your relationship with spiders? You like them?
I used to be terrified of them, but as I've gotten older, I can handle them now. I can put them in containers and put them in the backyard.
Yeah, okay. You're very brave. Well, often, if you were sitting there and a spider would crawl across the table, you'd probably like...
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's my reaction in that moment.
Just pull...
Yeah, but apparently this is a mistake. And the reason it's a mistake is because of how sharp sharks' teeth are. And when a shark's got a hold of your quad muscle and you pull away from it, it doesn't just let go of it. It holds onto that.
So you're pulling...
I essentially pulled my leg away from it, but separated this large chunk of my quad in that moment, which sounds horrific, but my first thought was just to not even acknowledge it, not look down, just forget about it, because I had this window to try and escape. So I've put my head down, I'm swimming towards the beach.
I also think that's probably like a very normal human reaction, right? To something that's trying to bite you, is try and pull away from it.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, and that's what people have been like, oh yeah, you probably shouldn't do that. I'm
even
like, well, what else am I going to do? Just be like...
Even if you'd read the manual on what you should do, as you ever trained knowing what to do and doing it, right?
Yeah, regardless, you're still probably going to panic.
Yeah. Did you, at that point, was there... did you? If it's all happening so quickly, but was there any point when you're thinking, I think I'm done here?
It came. I mean, yes, because when it comes back a second time, and I have this thought being as I'm swimming towards the beach, where I'm like, is it going to come back again? Not knowing, and I look over my shoulder, see it approaching. I put my hands out to try and stop it. But there's this moment that I can remember when my arms are outstretched, hands on the nose of the shark, and it's pushed me through the water. I'm thinking, like, am I ever going to get away from this thing? Again, there's that feeling of hopelessness. But in that moment, I was like, well, look at how much I've had to give up to get away from it once.
Yeah.
What am I going to have to do to get away from it a second time? So that's one moment where I was like, am I ever going to escape this situation? you feel so powerless there, because one thing that, you know, I realized through experience now, but having done a lot of research and studied sharks since, is how amazing they are. Like sharks are incredible creatures. There's a reason they've been around for millions of years, and it's because they're really good at finding things to eat and kill. Like they're incredibly good at that. And I was in the unfortunate position of finding that out firsthand. But when you know and you see firsthand how quickly they move through the water and how good they are at doing what they do, there's definitely a moment where you feel like you're just hopeless against this creature.
Yeah, I think part of me would be thinking, the only way I'm surviving this is if the shark chooses to not hit me, right? You're totally at their mercy.
Exactly, and that's not something that you know of. Like you're really, there's so much uncertainty there of how long this is going to last. So I end up escaping from it a second time because a wave actually hits us as I'm holding it at arm's length, and the wave ends up pushing me in quite a long way. And I don't know where the shark is at this point, but by the time I can actually surface, I stand up and it's about waist deep, the water. And I look up and see Joel paddling towards me as fast as he can. That makes up for, you know, all the shit that I talked about him earlier.
Yeah, thank God he was there at all, right?
Yeah.
Could you feel, with all the adrenaline that had been pumping through your body, could you even feel pain from the bite?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Like I didn't feel pain anywhere until I got back to the beach. And even then it wasn't pain in my leg.
Yeah.
It was actually pain in my stomach, which I thought was really strange at the time. But so Joel puts me on, like, he gets over to me. His instinct is to ask, you know, how bad is it? Which, you know, whether you think that's a good question or not, like he knows the answer to it before he's even asked it, because he's heard the screams. He can see the blood in the water. I don't have a surfboard. He can see me like trying to clamber onto his board. So he's like, okay, we've got to get to the beach. And he takes me into the beach, drags me up the sand, runs off to get some help. But I'm laying there like missing 3/4 of my left quad, losing blood rapidly. I had this pain in my stomach, which I didn't know at the time, but found out later it was actually my organs starting to shut down.
Holy shit.
And I'm asking myself the profound question of, is this what it feels like to die?
Yeah.
And that's a very profound point to get to, like to actually ask yourself that question and to kind of reason with it as well. Like as humans, we don't know what that's supposed to feel like. So the strange thing about asking that question is, like, how are you supposed to know? And the funny thing for me was, like, I actually just asked myself the question, and despite not knowing how close I was to death in that moment, there was this strange feeling that something didn't feel right. And I've told this story so many times now, and I still have no way to vocalize and to explain why something didn't feel right. It was just this feeling that I had that it wasn't my time. And I know that takes us down a very spiritual road of why things happen like this. But I mean, sometimes we feel like we have to assign a meaning to some things, and maybe they just are what they are.
Totally, because I think that you were going to say that you suddenly felt at peace or something like that, and you're accepting your fate. But no, you're sort of something, and you're saying, no, cunt, you're not done yet.
Exactly, yeah. Which is, and it's strange. I don't know why I had the right to think that, because like I was clearly incredibly close to death. But I think it was a good thing that I had that thought for whatever reason, because it allowed me to calm down a little bit and be like, well, if it's not my time, then, you know, everything's hopefully going to be okay. And what can I do to get through this? It's just focus on my breathing and staying present.
Yeah.
And that was probably one of the things that started slowing my heart down, slowing the blood flow down. And I think also keeping everyone else that was now starting to arrive calm, because I think because I wasn't, you know, in shock and really frantic, everyone else was really calm as well. And look, there's a lot of luck that goes into survival. It's not just me saying, nah, it's okay and things will work out. Like I was incredibly, incredibly lucky. Like I was lucky with where the shark bit me. It missed my femoral artery by 2 millimeters.
Yeah.
And the femoral artery is the major blood supply to the legs. So if it had touched that at all, there was no chance I was making it to shore.
You're lucky you had a mate with you.
I was lucky Joel was there.
Yeah.
Like I already, you know, already hung a fair bit of shit on him. So we don't need to go down that path anymore. But incredibly lucky he was there. I was lucky that the person that he ran off to get some help from, his wife, she was there on the beach that afternoon as well. It's the first time I've ever seen her watching him surf. And she's the person that called the ambulance, sorted the helicopter out, and knew exactly what I needed because she's an intensive care nurse. which is like that's an amazing thing to have in itself. But another person walking along the beach who was a first responder, or the person that helped Joel tie all the tourniquets and stuff, taking a rare walk along the beach where he doesn't know why he was there that afternoon. His name's John, and he was also a nurse.
So
Like,
when the worst thing happened, you had the best support team possible.
100%. Like, and this is the thing. Like, from how unlucky I was to be bitten in the first place. Like, luck is an interesting thing. How it works like that. And if you look at the odds of being attacked by a shark, and I've tried to find a number for it. I've found numbers that range anywhere between 1 in 3.6 and 1 in 11.5 million.
Holy shit! Yeah.
And that ranges depending on severity. That's anything from what's commonly described as like an encounter to a fatality. And I guess I'd be closer to the fatality end of things. So like that's incredibly unlucky. I've always said it's like winning the lottery, but in the wrong direction. Right? And it's the crazy thing is you go from the most unlucky that you've been in your life to probably having the luckiest moment over and over and over and over again happen within 20, 30 minutes. It's incredible.
And all of those things, like if some of those things didn't happen, you probably would have been dead, right?
100%.
So.
Like, and that's the thing. Like, obviously the femoral artery thing, that's pretty straightforward. If Joel wasn't there, I wouldn't have made it to the beach either, because by the time we got back to the beach as a collective, like I couldn't move my arms. I was so out of energy. I wouldn't have been able to do it by myself. Aggie being able to make a timely phone call, because Joel would have had to go back to the car, unlock his car, get his phone, and that's just minutes that he needed to be with me tying tourniquets. And obviously John walking along the beach and knowing exactly what to do, because Joel had a vague idea of like he needed to tie a tourniquet, but John was in there grabbing the artery being like, this is what we need to stop.
Yeah, fuck, okay.
So like it's to say that 99 times out of 100 my story ends in fatality on that beach, that probably understates it. Like it's crazy when I reflect on how lucky I've been. Like it's obviously very easy to be grateful to be alive after you can look at all that stuff objectively.
Absolutely, yeah. It'd be hard to be pessimistic after you've had this traumatic thing, but then you've had all these amazing things happen right after it that you can see both sides of the coin in the exact same few hours, or a few minutes, you know?
Definitely.
So they've done these steps, and then where'd you get taken?
So I got airlifted to St. George Hospital up here in Sydney. So a fairly short flight, I guess. I was conscious on the beach up until I got in the helicopter. So I can remember them tying the tourniquets. I can remember when the ambulance came. I can remember my parents getting there. I can remember all this stuff until I got in the helicopter, and then I wake up in hospital. And I wasn't really sure how bad things were. I mean, the first thing I do when I wake up in hospital is to try and call in sick for work, which is the most ridiculous thing ever.
Sorry, boss, not going to make it.
Yeah, not knowing how far news had spread already. And I was trying to like get the nurse's attention to be like, I need to call in sick for work.
I mean, that made TV, radio. What was
all sorts. So
yeah,
it was. To explain how fast news spreads, one of my mates who was living over in England at the time, he actually got a phone call from someone on the beach about it before my parents even found out.
What? That's nuts.
And it was in the papers, like in England. Even I think there was like a paper in Germany that someone sent me. Like it's shark attacks are something of public interest, and I'm not someone who like at the time I was very quiet and reserved, and to know that there was that much interest around it like kind of blew my mind, and that was a really difficult thing to deal with at the start. And like I didn't really know about it because I was just in an intensive care unit, and like I kind of vaguely knew on what was going on, but it wasn't until later on that I actually found out how significant it was. But I wake up in hospital, try and call in sick for work. My mum ends up coming into the room and she's like, no, your boss knows, it's all good. But then it kind of goes into like, all right, well, where are we? What's going on? And the doctors come in and they start explaining the whole situation to me, and they're like, it's a mess down there. Like, we've done an operation already just to try and clean the sand out of it. We don't exactly know what's been taken. We don't know what's left, but you've lost about like roughly 3/4 of your left quad. they're like, we're going to do another operation this afternoon where we're going to clean the rest of the sand out of it and try and figure out what we can do to try and save it from amputation.
How do they clean sand out of a giant gaping wound?
I don't know. I guess they just pressure wash it.
Vacuum it?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess they just wash it with like, I don't know, salty water or saline or whatever it is. But I was asleep at the time, so I wasn't really taking notes. But they say we're going to do the second operation, and from there we'll figure out what our options are. Because at the moment, we think if there's too much damage there, or if the bone has been damaged at all, then we're going to have to look at amputation.
Yep.
And that's a scary prospect within itself. Like obviously having your entire leg amputated is a big deal. The thing that I struggled with the most is I knew that it was perfectly good basically from the knee down, and I hated the idea of throwing away half a good leg.
Yep.
And that was something that I was essentially pleading with them to just be like, can you find another option and just give me a chance, because I'm not ready to lose that much of the leg there. So they go in, they do that second operation, and they come out of it and they're like, we think we've got enough where we can do something pretty experimental. They're like, we've been doing some research and there's this operation which we've seen done once before that we're probably going to give a crack on you. And I was like, okay, what's involved? And they're like, what we're going to do is take your entire left lat muscle from your back and transplant that into the leg, because there was 15 centimeters of exposed bone that they needed to cover up.
Okay.
And they were like, our priority, we need to give that bone some protection. So we want to lay the muscle over the top of that. And they're like, we need to connect a blood supply through the muscle to keep the muscle alive. And then they, in kind of like a throwaway line, they're like, and we're going to connect a nerve through that as well, which might make the muscle work. But forget about that for now. We're just trying to stop amputating the leg. And I'm like, okay, well.
So how do you feel when you get told that? I mean, they're going to take out a bit of your back.
Yeah.
But and it's highly experimental that they've seen on House MD or something like that. Yeah.
It's I mean, it is hard to hear, but I guess as a patient, you'd rather have the hope than them just being like, we're just going to chop it off and send you on your way. Because that was it. Like, they kind of lay it out. They're like, we can do this, or we can amputate. They're like, we can do this. There's a lot of uncertainty. We're not sure if it'll work. It'll be a very long process of recovery.
Yep.
Or we can amputate, put a prosthetic on, you'll be back walking in a couple of weeks. And it's like, that's obviously the easier option for everyone involved. But this option over here, as experimental as it is, you kind of just want to give yourself that chance.
Yeah. Even if it's a gamble,
yeah.
The idea of getting to keep your leg.
Yeah, is massive.
Yeah.
Is massive. But regardless of what they do, so we go in, we do the operation, come out, and they're like, it's been successful. We're not 100% out of the woods yet because there's chances that the muscle might not take. It was a huge operation. It went for like 8 hours. And it was on my birthday as well, so pretty good birthday present.
How old did you turn that day?
23.
Yeah, fuck,
yeah.
Man.
So they do this operation, come out of it, and they're like, okay, things are looking pretty good, but we'll keep track of how it's going. But then they start moving automatically into like what to expect moving forwards, and very directly they're like, losing 3/4 of your left quad muscle is no joke at all, despite the fact that we've been able to like transplant another muscle in there. Like, it's going to have huge deficits compared to where it was before. And they start talking about why losing that quad muscle is significant. They say the quad muscle, essentially, its function is to straighten your leg out as you move forward. So something that you do every time you take a step when you're walking. So they're like, walking for you is going to be really difficult. Like, they thought, I mean, we thought wheelchair for a long time, crutches, but they thought best case scenario is that I have a little prosthetic device on my knee which would straighten it out as I move forwards.
Mm-hmm.
And they say because of the damage there and the difficulties you'll have walking, like living an active lifestyle, running, all that sort of stuff is going to be a massive mountain climb. But then they go on to tell me the third thing, which is, everyone always sees the story going here. And this is the only thing that they said 100% for sure. They said, you will never surf again. Like so frankly and so matter of factly that there immediately just like shattered my world. And I knew that the chances of me being able to do it were pretty low, but you'd hope for something more than just someone being like, forget about that part of your life, which essentially made you who you are. Like that's a really difficult thing
I mean,
to
yeah,
hear.
I know it's different for surfers, but also if I was told after a shark had bitten me that I wasn't going to be able to surf again, I'd be like, I think I'm pretty good being on land, mostly.
Well, and that's the thing; it affects people in different ways. I always make sure that I tell people, I'm like, for some people, they'd be like, I enjoyed surfing once or twice. I'm pretty happy staying on land. Some people would be like, great, I don't want to go in the ocean. That's where the sharks live.
That's
right.
But I get it for surfers. They love the water.
Yeah.
Being bitten by a shark is not going to discourage you from wanting to get back into this place, which is your spiritual home.
Yeah, but even before getting to that point of wanting to get back in the water, I guess I had to go through this massive like grieving process and loss of all of these things, because surfing was more than just something I enjoyed to do. Like it was so much of my life.
It was your dream.
It was my dream.
Yeah.
It was my job. Like it's where all my friends were. It's my way of like it took up so much of my life that I couldn't comprehend what life would look like without it. Like everything that I did was centered around this one thing of surfing, and being told that I couldn't do it again, that led me to a place that I hadn't been before, because I had no idea what to do. Like my life was essentially in limbo. Despite having, the chance to make some sort of recovery, I was like, what's the point if I can't get back in the water?
Were you still in hospital when you were going through this thought process?
Yeah, so this is like early days. And that,
so it's hit you. I mean, it's hit you like a ton of bricks body wise, but also now, just in terms of you thinking about like what the fuck are you going to do with the rest of your life?
Yeah,
a bit lost.
It's heaps lost, and I think in a moment like that, I mean, I felt really alone there too. Like you feel alone in what you're going through. Like you feel statistically alone when you start looking at the numbers and asking yourself like, why am I the one? But the worst bit of it for me was just feeling like physically isolated in hospital. Like hospital's a shit place to spend time. The food sucks, it's cold, and it's really lonely.
Yeah.
I always said it's loneliest of all at night time when all your support goes home and it's just you laying in a bed, like 3 other strangers in a room, but it's just you with your thoughts basically.
Yeah,
and
that sucks.
For me, it's just thinking about the worst of the worst scenario there, and that was difficult. And you feel really hopeless in a moment like that. And I guess to try and, like, if you need to take the first step on whatever it is to turn this thing around, you need a tiny bit of hope.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to find in a moment like that.
Were you able to try and balance that with any positive thoughts of like, hey, at least I'm still alive?
It was difficult for me to see that at the time.
Yeah.
That was something that came a little bit later on. Like I was very, very lucky that I had some amazing people around me that as I started working through this process of seeing what life was going to look like afterwards, I started looking at that side of things a little bit more. Like you can be grateful to be alive, but for me, especially in those early days, like the thought and the prospect of losing surfing from my life, which was all it was, I was like, well, is it worth it if I can't do the things I love?
Yeah, the thing that you feel like is your calling in life is suddenly gone. You'd feel pretty aimless.
Definitely.
Right?
And look, it honestly only takes one moment to kind of turn everything around. Like when you feel hopeless, and I mentioned it before, all you need is a tiny bit of hope to kind of give you a different perspective. And for me, that came in the form of a text message from my physiotherapist, whose name's Scott. And he had committed to help me get back on my feet, which is amazing. But he sent me this message that had some words of advice in relation to goal setting that shifted the way in which I was looking at the whole situation. And the message is obviously something that resonated with me because I can remember every word from it. But the message says, you've obviously got a long and a hard road ahead of you. But just remember this. It says, people don't fail by aiming too high and missing. They often fail by aiming too low and hitting. So to look ahead with determination and set lofty goals.
Yeah.
And I just remember staring at that message and kind of assessing what that meant for me. And, I was looking at, what had happened to me. I was looking at the limitations that the doctors had put on me and thinking to myself, do I want to be defined by that?
Yeah.
Or do I want to do everything within my power to, regardless of how far it leads me, to be ambitious with whatever's in front of me and see how far it'll take me? And
right.
I had nothing to lose by going down that path. Like if you're presented with that option, like which one are you going to take?
Yeah. Yeah, you realise these limits that the doctors are putting on you wasn't what you felt within you.
Yeah, exactly. And like I think that's something that I kind of knew all along, But just getting that message and having someone else that you know is going to be alongside you, I think is massive.
It feels like that message came at the right time where you needed that.
Yeah, like it's honestly perfect. Like I credit that with kickstarting this whole recovery.
I want to ask with you're talking about the impact on your leg of these muscles from your lat, but what was the impact on your back?
So with the lat muscle, so its function is it essentially helps with anything above head or anything where you're pulling down. So they don't like to take it from swimmers, surfers, and rock climbers because you need it for those functions. But it is the second biggest single muscle and one that would do the job of covering that. So they just didn't have any other options.
Yep.
And like I've had a pretty good relationship with my surgeon afterwards, and catching up with him and talking about like the whole operation and why he did what he did. And his whole thing is that he just needed to give me the best chance. And like if they didn't think I was going to surf again, then it didn't matter if they took the lat muscle. So that's kind of why they look to take something like that. But the back, it does adapt. There are other muscles which kind of sit up under your shoulder there on the back, which can do a similar job, just not to the same strength and power.
Yep.
The best way to describe it is they just get fatigued more quickly.
Yeah, okay. So the impacts on your lats or your back versus the value add to your leg was much more significant, right, in terms of the value added than the value lost.
Yeah, essentially, which is, you know, you don't really think about this when you're in hospital, but
Sure.
I guess surgeons are smart people, so you usually trust them with doing whatever they need to do.
Yeah.
But that being said, I contrast how good surgeons are at what they do with, you know, the messaging that I was getting in regards to like not walking again and not surfing again. Like there's obviously a gap there, and I guess you see this in very intelligent people all the time, is like very, very smart, but maybe not the most emotionally intelligent.
No. I mean, you say, how many movies do you watch, right, where doctors say something like, "Oh, you'll never do this again."
Yeah.
I'll show you, doc.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah.
I guess I guess most of the time they're just trying to like set expectations low so you don't the person doesn't get crushed.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really leave much room for hope or like dreams or motivation, all these kind of things that were driving you.
Definitely. And there's an old man that I met when I was in hospital that actually gave me good perspective on that when I got into the recovery ward. So I was in hospital for 5 weeks, and this was the 5th week of it. And for some reason, I spent most of my stay in hospital in wards with stroke victims. And I have no idea why they put the guy who was attacked by a shark in with stroke victims. But I met this awesome old dude in there who it was the 3rd stroke that he'd had. And he had his first one at like 40, and then he had the next one when he was 50, and then the next one when he was 60. And he said, as I was there chatting to him, he was like, "It's amazing how differently they talk to you as you get older." He's like, when I was 40, the messaging was, "You're young, you're pretty healthy, you're going to have a good chance of recovery." And he said this time they're like, "Well, you've had a pretty good run. Like, we'll get you back home and you know, put you on your way." And
He's giving him last rites.
yeah, exactly. But because he'd been through it before, he knew what it took to kind of get back to, you know, some sort of normal life and to excel at whatever it was that he wanted to do. But I just remember hearing what he said in regards to like, just forget about what the doctors say. Like, it really can be determined by so many other factors that you're going to face from here on forwards. So, it is. You're right. They probably do say things like that to cover themselves and to set expectations low. But you know, that's probably detriment. Like I know so many people just in having these conversations where they've been told that bad news and they just take it as reality and they just go with it. And you wonder how many people get left behind because they cling on to that news. I mean, I know this is true because I got a message from a lady recently who watched my film when it came out. And this was like one of the best messages I've ever received. So the documentary came out on the 9th of March, and she messaged me on the 11th. So 2 days after it came out. She goes, "I've watched it 3 times already." And I had no connection to this lady, didn't know how she came across the film, anything like that. She goes, "I've watched it 3 times already. I had a stroke about 4 years ago, and watching this has inspired me to actually get back and book in some physio and try and get back to where I was." And I was like, that's obviously amazing that I've been able to have that impact on someone. But you look at what she must have been told, and the fact that she's been sitting there for 4 years being like, this is reality for me. And you just wonder how many people get left behind like that.
Yeah, it's weird to think like that, because there's obviously some people who are of the mindset that being told that they can't do something, they rebel against that, right? And they use that as fuel. But then you're right, there are also other people who probably never reach the potential they could because they get convinced of what they've been told by a doctor.
Yeah.
And that's pretty sad.
It is very sad. And I guess that's a motivator for me sharing my own stories to hope to get a message like that for someone saying like, I've made a massive change like this. It's not the only reason you do it, and you can't expect everyone to have that sort of response from it. But it is definitely something that, because I've been through it and I've heard the messaging, it sits pretty heavily with me.
And this is your film Attacking Life, which is on Stan?
Yes.
Right? So obviously it must have been around, was it around this time that you started to have the idea of filming something?
So this came a little bit later on.
Yeah.
The film actually started off, it took 3 years to put together. So started off like 2020 sort of time. So it was when I was getting into my speaking a little bit more, and I reached out to a good friend of mine and I was like, hey, can we put together something to, use as a bit of an intro and a context setter for when I'm speaking? And he was like, yeah, we'll work on something together. We put together this 5-minute clip and then showed it to someone. And they were like, it needs to be more than 5 minutes, you kidding me? So 5 minutes turned into 20 minutes, which then turned into a feature-length film. But I knew from a fairly early stage that I was going to have something that I wanted to share. I just didn't really know how, and I didn't know when was going to be the right time. I mean, everyone always tells you to write a book, and I was like, I want to do something different, so I'll do something in film because it's something that's always interested me. But
that's cool.
I guess the timing plays a pretty important part too, because if I was to do it too early where it's just about attack and recovery, then I felt like there was so much more to add to it, which is why I wanted to include like how I apply the things that I learned through the attack and recovery to something current, which was paddling the Molokai to Oahu challenge. Yep. So that was kind of the motivator for it waiting a little bit longer, and obviously being in a better position to tell the story myself was important too.
Yeah. So, I mean, why was that important for it to be not just, I mean, the story of shark attack and recovery is interesting in and of itself, right? But then you were like, okay, I want to move the story further than that. What was the reason that was driving you to do that?
I guess it kind of goes back to what I learned from Scott helping me out with that message and the way in which we set goals, because the first goals that we set were fairly straightforward. It was like regaining my independence, livelihood, and getting back in the water and surfing again. And going through that process to get back to the point of surfing again was massive. But for me, when I got to that point, which was this one big thing that I was heading towards for months, and it was all I cared about and something that I just dedicated so much time and effort to, I reached that point and I was kind of like, well, now what? Like, I didn't want to stop there, and I really wanted to use the momentum that I'd had and all these things that I'd learned to kind of just put them in a different context and see how far it would take me. And I think that's a really important part of the story, because if it's just the attack and the recovery, I don't think people can really resonate with it as much, because, frankly, not many people get to experience a shark attack.
Yeah.
But everyone's going to go through some sort of challenge, whether it is something ridiculous that they set themselves, like paddling 54 kilometers between 2 islands in Hawaii, or if it's something else, just like a regular goal that they set in life. I think when you can see it in a few different contexts, it has a lot more value, and that was why it was pretty important for me to keep setting those goals and to have something like that be the real takeaway from the film, not just horrific thing happens to local guy and he recovers.
But then you're allowed to dream again. You're allowed to set goals again, and then work towards them, despite the setback.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's very cool.
And that took time to get to as well. Like, this whole journey has been a big learning process.
I wanted to ask you that. Like, what was it like the first time trying to stand or like walk with your lat muscles in your
back
leg?
as your leg. Yeah.
Did it feel weird? Was it hard? Was it what?
I mean, you don't really take into account the anatomical processes that are going on, but they were big moments for me. Like, I can remember what it was like to stand up on my feet for the first time. I remember what it was like to take the first steps. And for me, there's a lot of moments throughout that recovery where they're kind of like checkpoints and big moments where I'm like, this is great. Now what's next? And like even just from getting up on my feet the first time, that happened when I was still in hospital, not unassisted or anything like that, just standing upright. That was a huge moment for me. And I kind of was like, well, if I can do this today, what can I do tomorrow? And the next day I got up on my feet and I walked to the bathroom. And then the next day I walked to the door. And then the day after I walked around the ward. And then like it got to the point where I'd spent like an entire day just walking around the ward because I was like, this feels amazing. I can do these things. And I had this big walking frame that I was just shuffling around on. Like it's nothing flashy, but I was heaps happy just to be doing it. And the same thing happens with getting back in the water and surfing again. Like I wasn't doing it the way I was before. Like getting back in the water for me was just standing up on a longboard, which is nowhere near the surfing that I was doing before. But it's such a significant moment in that journey because you've gone so far just to get to a point that you were told that you would never do it again. And I think when you tick those things off, you just have to ask yourself again, like, what if I can do this? What's possible? And it drives you to want to do more with it. And I think that's really, really powerful.
Was there anything at all psychologically when you were getting back in the water that was triggering for you? Was there any fear of the water after the attack?
Not so much. That always disappoints people. But
I can see it if you spend most of your life in the water and it's a positive place, and then you also you obviously it was the mindset that sharks are these beautiful creatures and they're not evil. They're just animals.
Just sharks doing sharky shit. Yeah.
Then I can get it that you wouldn't necessarily be afraid of it, but it's obviously something that people are curious about because you don't know how someone's going to think with that.
It's a valid question, but I guess it makes more sense to explain why I felt okay with it because there is the parts of like the respect that I've always had for sharks and the fact that every time you go in the ocean, you accept the risk that something may happen. And for a large majority, they'll surf their entire life and never see a shark. Like that's part of it is accepting the risk and going back in the water again. It's just the same thing that you're doing. But for me, I made a really big point before I was getting back in the water to try and educate myself a little bit more on sharks, to understand maybe why it happened that afternoon. What were some of the conditions that maybe heightened the risk? And then learning just a little bit more about shark behavior in general and trying to understand things from their point of view. And I think when you do that, it helps you see the creatures for what they are. And like you said, to look at them and have respect for them as creatures rather than be afraid of them. And that's a really big thing that helped me rationalize it. But I guess using the word rational it kind of doesn't make sense there because the fear of sharks is something that is so irrational.
Yeah. And
that's an interesting thing because, I talk to people all the time and I ask them, like, what are some of your greatest fears? And there's two of the most common ones that I get back: public speaking and sharks.
Yeah, or spiders, sharks. Yeah, they're definitely up there. If I was in the water and I saw a shark fin, I'd fucking shit myself.
Well, I would argue that the sharks you don't have to worry about are the ones that you see. So it's the ones you don't see are the ones you got to worry about.
It's like when people used to tell me, like, before I got arrested, like, does it ever like scare you when you hear sirens? And I said, well, when the cops actually come for you, there's no sirens.
Yeah, 100%.
They just smash down the door with a battering ram.
Yeah, so it's funny how people, I guess, have these ideas of how these situations work, right? And like I've kind of been trying to ask people from time to time, like before I'll even tell my story, and be like, how, if you were to tell a story of a shark attack, how would it work for you? And everyone always, it's what you perceive and what you know, which a lot of people is Jaws.
Yeah.
Right? They'd be like, you see the fin coming through the water, the music's playing, and that's how it works. But it's not at all. And
they ram you off your board.
Yeah, exactly.
And then whack.
But the interesting thing about that fear of sharks and trying to overcome that, and the fact that it is an irrational fear, is there are far more things that you should be worried about. Like, it's the funny thing that I mentioned before about how people are like, oh, you were surfing in the late afternoon. I'm like, well, when you need to drive home at nighttime, like if something happens, what if someone says to you, oh, you were driving at nighttime?
Yeah,
like,
what were you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
You know it's dangerous.
And that's the thing, like there's far more things that you should be worried about. Like the chances of something happening when you're driving a car or crossing the street are far greater than the odds of being attacked by a shark. So I guess looking at things rationally there help. It doesn't fully take the fear away though. Like there's always something in the back of your mind where, regardless of the fact that you're out there, you can still have those thoughts kind of creep in. The big thing like that, and that's always been a part of surfing. Like you always know that there could be something out there, and for the large majority, like there probably is a shark somewhere in vicinity. But that, when you look at that, how many people go in the ocean and how many shark attacks there are, then that's okay.
It's minimal, yeah.
But the biggest difference I'd say now compared to maybe earlier on is if I have those thoughts, I'm perfectly fine paddling in, and just being content with the fact that, surfing doesn't mean the same to me anymore. So I don't have to try and push through that fear to be in the water to get better. Like I'm very happy to be in the water every single day. I do get out there and I just enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of, I hope that explains my relationship with sharks and that fear.
And if they see you in the water, they probably see the bite and they're like, all right, he's already part of the
We've
club.
already sorted him, yeah.
Leave him alone, boys. He's had enough. Yeah.
Well, okay, I'll tell you a story that I've told a few times. I haven't fact-checked it, so I don't know how true it is, but it's a great story if it's true. I've been told of a guy who has been attacked twice.
Yeah.
He lived in South Australia. They called him Sharky, which is a great nickname for someone who's been attacked twice.
Yeah.
And to speak to those other things that you should be worried about, he ended up dying in a car crash. So, look, that's a very that brings the mood down a lot. That story,
survived 2 shark attacks though, and then
and yeah, that again, because I often tell that story and people are like, oh, you must feel pretty safe out there in the water now, or I'll come surf with you because I'm like, yeah, but
Also, you've already talked about being the opposite of the lottery. Like, how many people can it happen twice to?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just going to... So I want to ask you, you've gone through this process of, having this realization that you were no longer going to be able to pursue that dream of being a professional surfer, and then you'd set yourself these lofty goals of paddling. How far was it? 54 kilometers?
Yeah.
From in Hawaii, was it?
Yeah.
But had you processed, or where were you in that kind of thought process of figuring out who is the new Brett? Like, where were you going to fit into the world, and what were you going to do with your life?
Yeah, it's interesting because I did spend a lot of time chasing the old Brett. Like, after I had that first surf back, all of my goals that came from there were very surfing oriented. And it was really about getting back to a level of surfing that I would be happy with again.
Yeah.
You look at that objectively and you say you should just be happy to get back in the water. But I wanted to try and push that a lot to the point where my goals started going from being like, I want to ride the old boards that I was riding to like, I want to surf in a competition again, and then I want to win a competition again. And they're strange goals to set yourself because they're natural to set and it makes total sense. But as I was kind of chasing those goals and I did get back to a point where my surfing was great and I was really, really happy with it. And I'd had a bit of success in competition, not the level that I had before, but like I did end up winning one of the local competitions years after. And that felt amazing to achieve that goal. But at the same time, I kind of looked at what that meant for me. And I kind of had to ask myself the question, like, did I just go through that whole experience just to become the person that I was beforehand? And I think when you arrive at that point, you kind of have to ask yourself the question, like, what do you actually want out of this? And for me, when I started looking at those 2 different lives that I was living, which was like, I had the option to go back to the person I was before, or I could maybe pursue something different. And for me, pursuing something different was like, I found out by then that the story had appeal and people enjoyed listening to it. And there was a greater meaning beyond this than, just sharing this shark tale. And that was actually helping people. And I was kind of weighing these 2 things up and saying, I don't necessarily want to leave surfing behind, but maybe I just want to focus on something else that can bring a little bit more purpose to my life, because the surfing thing was great.
Yeah. Were you noticing, even when you were competing though, was there like a noticeable difference in your physical limitations from before?
There was, but it is incredible how the body adapts.
That's cool.
And the way in which you can be weaker, or like the strength deficit between my legs so my left leg is 30% weaker than my right, but it still works a way out So it makes it happen.
Okay, so then if you're saying the body is that adaptable, and so the mindset wasn't, if I want to be competitive, I could still do it.
Yeah.
But you're also asking, do I still want that anymore?
And that was essentially what it came to. I actually think that I could probably have a decent success rate against old me in competition because of the way that my surfing now is kind of based on. Like I kind of went back to the fundamentals of surfing, whereas before I was more of a progressive surfer, which is better if you do well, but there's also more risk involved. So you fall off a lot, and there's probably a lot of heats where you will end up with a low score, whereas I can have a consistently good score now based on the surfing that I do. So I'd probably beat old me many times. But you're right. It did come down to that point of being like, what do I want out of life now? And I guess the person I was before, it's not like I was dissatisfied with that at all, because that did bring me a lot of meaning in life. But you know, it really is. It's like that message I mentioned from the lady before. Like when I was working in the surf shop, I could make someone's day by selling them a surfboard that they liked, but you could never change someone's life.
Totally.
And I guess that's something that brought a lot of appeal to what I do now, is sharing the story, and that's something that I do through keynote speaking and do through podcasts, and I do through the film, and that's something that I think, as I look back in however long, I can be very happy that I made that decision to do that. And who knows where the surfing thing may have gone, but I'm really satisfied with the decision that I have made.
That must have been cool when you first started to talk to people and share your story, and you found that it was kind of people were getting a lot out of it. That must have been quite enriching for your soul.
It was, and the first it happened right at the start too. I grew up and spent a lot of time being very shy, awkward, reserved, and there's an argument to be made that I still am, but I remember the first time I got offered to speak somewhere. It was one of my mates who worked at a secondary college that was local, and he said, "Can you come in and do a talk for Are You OK Day?" for like the Year 9 group, I think. And I was like, man, that doesn't sound like my thing, but you know, I know the importance of mental health after I've been through. I'll come in and do my best.
Yeah.
So
Brett, who's been bitten by a shark, is still more afraid of public speaking than he is of sharks.
By far. And I walk into this school and I have no idea what I'm doing. And I hadn't even gotten back in the water at that point. This was 4 months after the attack. So I just chronologically told the story about the attack. Like started off with a bad day at work and then just worked my way through it up until where I was. And I was like, and maybe we'll see what happens next. But I finished talking and I spoke for 40 minutes. And then I had 20 minutes of questions. And afterwards, the teachers came up to me and they're like, we have never seen those kids sit still for 5 minutes. And you just had them engaged for an hour. They're like, that was incredible. I just remember the feeling that gave me. And I was like, maybe there is something here in this story. And that does bring you a lot of fulfillment just in knowing that you can captivate someone and share something with them. And I know it's not something that you're, like, I've done this for long enough now to know that I'm not going to speak to a group of people and know that everyone's going to walk away and change their life. But it's just about providing perspective and doing it in a way that people can use in their own lives.
I mean, even if you don't, it doesn't move people in a way that they do anything after they leave the room. There's still something to be said for just being able to capture their attention, right? And I think your story certainly would do that for most audiences, right? They're like, holy shit.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, there's a shark attack story is always going to be interesting. Like, people are always intrigued by it. And that's something that it kind of sits at odds with what I try and have my takeaway as, which is that it doesn't matter what happens to you. Like, it should, like, what really matters is how you respond. And by that logic, I should not talk about the attack and I should probably leave it in the past. But the way I look at it is that the attack is kind of that's the hook, for like lack of a better word.
Right?
Like
But the takeaway is what you did after.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. And that's what means a lot to me. And that's what people are going to get the most out of it at some stage in life. You just want to be the bookmark for them, that when they're going through their version of the shark attack, that they can be like, oh, this is what I've heard this person did, or this is how it relates to something that's worked for me in the past. And that's something that I've learned is really powerful. Like, I mean, I use the school example for many, many things. Like, I was lucky enough to speak at a school today, and it's how I got my start in speaking. But like, I can remember the person that came to my school and did that talk. And to be that person for someone who's, you know, at the early stages of their life, I think is pretty incredible.
Yeah, for sure. So is that what are the things you're working on at the moment? So you do the public speaking,
Yeah.
and then you've got the film, and then what else are the things that keep you busy?
So through doing the film, my friend and I, Sam, who we did the film together, we set up a production company so we could produce the film in-house. So that's set up there for us to do whatever work comes our way as of now. And we're working on a few pretty cool things at the moment. But my biggest thing is, as I have gone around sharing my story, I've realized that there's plenty of other really amazing stories out there. And I guess it's something that I want to try and bring a voice to other people that may not have the platform that I've been lucky enough to have just due to the stature of my story.
Yeah.
So being able to share other stories like that, I think is something that will naturally come next for me, because I guess there's only so long I can, you know, talk about a shark attack that happened when I was 22 and not be some old crusty old
How old are
dude
you
being
now?
like
30?
30, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like it's even getting like, who knows how long that can go for, but it's
That's exactly why I raced to do my first solo show about prison when I wasn't I wasn't sure I was technically good enough to do a whole solo show, because I was like, if I'm still talking about the 4 months I spent in prison in 4 years,
Yeah.
I'll shoot myself. Right, so I get that.
Yeah.
But it's cool to enjoy that ride while it's happening, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess there's plenty of other things that can be relevant after that as well when it comes to speaking. And I guess for me, I want it to be authentic. Like, I don't think I could do it if it wasn't authentic.
Yep.
And it is authentic to me. And that's the thing that makes speaking easier for me to do compared to like when you have to do it in school, when you've got to do a presentation on, I don't know, something to do with history or whatever. Like, you don't really care about that. But for me, like, I know my story and I care about it and I'm passionate about it,
Yep.
and that makes life a lot easier.
Absolutely.
I still get nervous. I still get sweady. I still hate it.
Sure.
But
you
I
don't have
also
to
love
remember
it.
like, oh, it's your story. You
Exactly.
were there.
You just recount it. Yeah. Yeah, truly.
I wanted to ask, do you have a girlfriend, partner? What was?
I got a wife. I
Oh.
got married last year. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So, how did you guys meet?
We met at a local cafe because she loved my dog, who I was sitting there having a coffee with.
Yeah, right.
First time it's ever worked for me, having a dog.
It was about time, right?
Yeah, I know. He finally paid off.
Because I had this curiosity in my head. I was like, if you're on dating apps, like, at what point do you mention the shark?
Well, the school I spoke at earlier today, they submitted some questions beforehand, and I was talking to the teacher afterwards, and she was like, there were a group of boys that didn't show up for today's thing, but they had some really interesting questions. It was like, can you bring us a surfboard to have? Do you ever use it as a pickup line? Can you buy us Maccas? I was like, school kids are the best.
So when you met your wife,
Yeah.
at what point in the conversation do you talk about the leg?
That's a good question. It's something that I had always worried about.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously, like, it's a very visual scar, and it's something that you're not going to be able to hide. And it's obviously something that, so my wife is originally from Canada, and she moved to Australia, and she spent a lot of time and somehow ended up in this small town of Kiama. Like, it's a miracle that we even met. But because of what had happened to me, like, obviously a lot of people in town know me. So it's not like I could just cruise around town and be like, everyone saying hi, and her be like, why does everyone know you around here? So I remember being really nervous on kind of telling her about it. And it's a weird thing to kind of like, how do you bring that up in conversation? You just like, oh, the stars are nice tonight, but I got attacked by a shark once.
And moving on.
Yeah. I think it came up when we were talking about what we do for work. And I still to this day struggle when people are like, what do you do for work? And I'm like, I am a speaker. like, what does that actually mean?
I'm a speaker. I'm sure I'm not giving a very good example of it right now.
Yeah, exactly. So I always found it really hard to explain that. But then obviously the conversation goes, what do you speak about? Like, how did you get into this? And the story kind of just went that way. And the biggest fear that I had was kind of showing her the scar for the first time, because it's not pretty.
No, that's why I asked about this, because
Yeah.
I was like, I think it doesn't matter if you're a girl or a guy. I think people can be self-conscious about
Yeah,
stuff, right? And
definitely.
particularly when you're looking at like a prospective partner. That's why I was curious about it.
Yeah, and lucky for me, she's like, I mean, she's a very, very caring person, and I don't think that would have turned her off at all, regardless of what it looks like. But it is funny how that is something that you do think about. Like I've actually had offers from my surgeon where like years after the attack, he was like, hey, if you ever wanted to do something to make this look more normal, we could do a procedure. And I was like, I don't think I'd really want to though. It is
interesting, like cosmetic surgery.
They could fill it with something to make it look bigger and then do something to make it look more the color of the other leg. It wouldn't look perfect, but he's like, it'd look more normal. And I was like, I don't think I'd want to do that. Like for me, that is like looking down at it is a bit of a reminder, and I guess like it's the battle scar, right? It's definitely a conversation starter too.
I think I'd be so self-conscious when I'm like talking about like my body image with like a possible sexual partner, but when it's dudes, when it's guys, like guys love like gnarly scars, right? So it's more like guys who just want to see it out of curiosity, right? And I don't think I'd feel self-conscious then, but it is, these are the kind of thoughts that I wanted to ask you about, because there are things that I would think about.
Well, it's a very valid one. Like maybe if I'd had issues dating, and maybe I hadn't come across like an amazing wife by now, then maybe I'd think about it. But like it's because obviously it's like that really is the elephant in the room when it comes to, you know, like potential deal breakers, right?
Yeah. If you've got like disfigurements or any kind of things to your body, you're always worried. Like, is this going to be something that turns them off?
Definitely. And lucky for me, it's worked out.
You still get heaps of dudes who will buy you a beer at the pub.
Yeah,
all right,
exactly.
Show us the leg.
Show us the leg. Yeah.
Have you got shorts on now?
Yeah. No, I don't. I got long pants.
That's all right. When we do this, when I publish this podcast, like for YouTube, can we put? I think there's like a photo, or at least, of your leg on your.
I got all sorts of photos. You can use the best or the worst one depending on how you view it.
I think people listening to this would want to be like, what is this fucking thing?
Well,
look
it's a natural curiosity, right?
Yeah.
Like people are very intrigued by scars, and the funny thing for me that happens is because of what happened to me, I found people would come up to me and be like, hey, look at what happened to my mate. And they'd be showing me photos of injuries. Like, why do you think I'm comfortable with this?
Totally non-shark related at all.
100%. And they'd be like, hey, a guy got his hand caught in one of the belts at work the other day. And I'd be like, the fuck? It's like...
They just think you just like love gruesome injuries.
Yeah. And I'm like, just because I'm okay looking at mine doesn't mean I'm okay looking at others. Like,
it's so funny how people's twisted minds work, right?
It is funny.
They just assume, you'll love this.
Yeah.
If there's any guy that'll love this, it's you.
It's you. And the other thing too with sharks is people always they'll come up and I feel like they don't know what to say, and they'll just be like, what's a shark story? What's a shark story? My mate, he was surfing one day and he saw, and I'm like, yeah, like there's sharks in the ocean. Like I've heard plenty of stories.
Man.
Like it's really funny. I've found how people approach the subject. It's hilarious. And then the other thing is, I've always found that there's like two types of people. There's people that they have a question that they want to ask, but they also want to be respectful, and they'll not ask it for whatever reason. And then there's people that will just ask the question regardless.
Yeah.
There's always a question, regardless of who the person is.
Yeah.
And just some people will ask it, some people won't.
What's the weirdest question?
Probably like, did your wife care about the look of the scar? No.
Jackpot.
Yeah.
I win.
I can't remember the strangest one that I've been asked. There's definitely there's definitely common ones, like did it hurt? How big was it?
Yeah.
What was the scariest moment? They're ones that are very common, but as far as strange ones go, I can't remember any off the top of my head, but like there's definitely some that are out there.
There are times when you just, obviously you're on a podcast now, so we've talked about the story in the longest possible version, right? Yeah. But are there times when someone's like asked you to tell the story and you just like, you just could not be asked? Like it's just, you don't want to tell it?
Not really. I guess it comes up a lot where people are like, oh, you must be sick of telling the story. And I'm like, not really, because like it's not something that bores me by any chance. I know people get a lot from listening to it, so it's not a chore for me at all. But there's different ways to tell the story, I guess, depending on who it is. Like I've always found it difficult to tell the story in a quick, brief manner, but you know, the regular time to tell the story can range anywhere between like 30 minutes and 2.5 hours.
Right.
Honestly, like
Yeah.
it can really blow out depending on how much detail you go into. But I guess I just love it that people are curious and they will ask those questions. And if people are curious, I'm always going to be open to talking about the story. And that's something that I've always known is a must when it comes to like my experience and how you deal with a situation like that. Like I couldn't bottle it up. It's not something that I could keep for myself. And it's something I learned pretty early on when I was still in hospital. This guy came in, hadn't met him before, and he sits down next to me as I'm laying in the bed and he just starts telling the story of a shark attack. I was like, I was there like eyes wide open.
Are you for real, mate?
Yeah. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, does this guy actually know what I've been through? Like, and he gets to the end of this story. He's speaking for like 20 minutes. And he's like, do you know why I've told you this story? And I was like, no. Just to scare the shit out of me. Like, why have you told me this story? And he goes, like, as someone who has been through it, you are going to have to talk about it. People are going to be interested, so you're going to have to get used to it. And I just wanted you to know that there's plenty of other people out there that have the same thing, and you know it's never really going to go away.
Yeah. You mentioned that part.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you'd forgotten that you mentioned it.
No, but
it's so true, right? It's
Yeah.
like, but you didn't know how true it was at the time, right?
Yeah.
You're sitting in hospital and you get told that, and then here you are years later, and you've got a career out of it,
Yeah.
right? And but I think there's a difference between you telling the story and people go home and go, oh fuck, I heard this hectic shark story, and then there's a way you tell it about the life and the man you've become after it, and the way that you set all these goals for yourself, and this is and this is made your life so much richer. That's the part where people go, actually, that's something where that gives me something for my own life. Right?
Yeah.
And that's when the story actually is much more higher value, and that
Yeah.
must be cool when you do get those messages from people that it gives them something which puts a lens on their own life, where you're like, actually, that's what I do all this for.
Yeah, and I've always kind of gone by the one person rule. Like if everything I do, like the speaking, the podcast, the film, if it all it does is just help one person, that's one more person that I didn't have the capacity to help beforehand. And I think that's for me been a good way of looking at it, because I think if you try and like get some sort of numbers out of it, or you'd want to try and achieve some sort of success out of it, it feels pretty hollow.
Yeah.
You don't want to do it for those sorts of reasons. So for me, it's kind of like we'll look back at the end, and if I've been able to help some people out, then that's amazing, and it's a cool journey for me, because like it's definitely very fulfilling for me, and I guess it's a very different life, the one I live now compared to what it was before. Like,
And where it was likely to head.
yeah, definitely. And
But-
now I get to try and explain how my job's a speaker.
But it sounds like you like to set yourself pretty lofty goals, right? And you've created some crazy ones, like what you did in Hawaii. That's what's the next goals that you're setting yourself?
Yeah, so there's probably two main ones. Like number one is to keep doing the speaking thing and keep growing that. That's something that's always going to be there. But I'll always have some sort of physical challenge that I'm kind of aiming towards. And
Yeah. So you're talking about the running?
yeah,
right?
so I'm doing a 50K trail run in the Central Coast in a month's time.
Yeah.
I'll always have something like that. And I kind of do that for two reasons. Number one is to keep myself fit and healthy. And number two is to just challenge myself. I think there's so much value in challenging yourself and going through that struggle. And the way I kind of approach it now is very directly to say to myself, like, the reason I'm doing this is to prove to myself that the things that I have had to use in the past and the things that I've learned through not only the attack and the recovery, but some of the other things that I've done, that they apply in situations that are just a far more controlled environment than shark attack.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to resilience, like the things that got me through that, resilience itself is a muscle. So the more that you can work on it, the stronger it is. And when you do get faced with the things that come out of the blue, you're better equipped to deal with them. And I think that's something that I like to just kind of prove to myself. And I also hope that other people see that and can see the value in struggle and can actually see that you can learn a lot through struggle.
Yeah.
It's
Couldn't agree more.
something that when it comes to, there's a question I get asked quite a lot, which I used to always hate. The question is, what advice would you give to a younger you? Have you been asked this question before?
No.
What advice would you give to a younger you?
Don't get caught by the cops.
That's a good one. Very practical advice.
What do you say to that question?
Well, so
Don't get bitten by a
don't
shark.
get bitten by a shark. Don't go surfing on the 30th of March 2016. No, it's funny because I always felt like I had to give a really profound answer to it. And I don't think you really do, because in reality, I'd love to sit like 14-year-old Brett down and tell him about everything I'd been through, everything I'd learned along the way, all these things that I now know, but I don't think he truly would have understood it until he went through it for himself. And that there encapsulates the value of struggle. And I guess that leads me to the profound quote side of things, which is one that people have probably heard before, but I think it's a really cool one, which is that we all have two lives, and our second one begins when we realize we only have one life. And I think that's something that, whether you learn that through a struggle or you learn that from hearing a story and gaining perspective, like we're all going to reach that point at some stage. And like you've obviously got that point for yourself where you reach that point where you realize that you've probably only got one shot at this, and yours has led you to what you're doing today. And like that, you look around and everyone's kind of got that point, which I think is amazing. Yeah.
So if I jokingly say, if I could tell my younger self, don't get caught by the cops, but I wouldn't be living this happy life and doing all the amazing things I get to do if that didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's the same with you. You would have been on a different path, but like the life that you get to live now happened because of the path led by a fucking shark attack, right?
Yeah.
So it does kind of spin you out when, these crisis points can be the thing that shapes you and defines you and builds you into a stronger character. I absolutely. That's a common through line of this podcast, is how adversity can really build your character. And so many amazing people I get to speak to on here are only those amazing people because of the shit they've gone through.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like, and then you talk to other people, or you see other people who have sadly gotten to like 70 and not done all the amazing things that they could in their life because they didn't go through maybe enough struggle or something.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of leads you down a greater path of not wanting to experience regret. And however you get to the point of saying like, fuck it, I'm just going to do this because I don't want to regret having not do it. Like whatever gets you to that point is its own journey, and it has its own value, and is valid within itself. And I guess that's, I look around at a lot of different stories, and I always struggle because mine is obviously a terrible story that had a good outcome.
Yep.
And I've always asked myself, like, what would happen if it didn't have such a good outcome? I still think it would have led me down a path that would have given me a lot more knowledge towards life, that it would have probably led to me doing something different anyway, regardless of what the outcome would have been. And I guess, again, that just speaks to the value of that adversity that you said, and kind of goes to, one of the biggest things that I try and tell everyone, that I've probably said a number of times already, but it's so important to me, which is that it doesn't matter about what happens to you, but what matters is, what you do next. And I guess like that's kind of the whole story of this podcast, right? Shit's gone sideways, but now.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's an amazing thing. You meet all these people, and you think it just shows you just how amazing the human spirit is, right? That sometimes, it's not until shit hits the fan that the people are able to find out so much about themselves that they never knew existed, right? And it's usually a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, and like everyone will get to that point at some stage in life. I always hope that it's not a shark attack that gets people to realize that. But
totally, and I hope it's sooner rather than later, right? I hope that someone doesn't get to 80 years old and think back and think, fuck, I should have had something. I wish I got bitten by a shark earlier. But,
exactly.
It's everyone's got their own journey, but it is. It seems to be a common thing that when things go south, there's just something within people that goes, nah, let's do something about this.
Yeah,
we can bounce back.
Yeah, definitely. And like however you bounce back, that journey again, that's different. How I did it's different to how you've done it. It's different to how that person who's 70 or 80 that might realize that he's going to do it as well.
Sure.
And I guess that probably speaks to the randomness and beauty of life anyway, that everyone's experience is different.
But when you were talking about just those little push goals of like standing and then taking a few steps, you know, that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about, where there's just something in you that's going like, I can do this.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And then you're getting this amazing rush of thinking like, I have this within me. What's the next goal? What's the next goal? What's the next goal? Until you've suddenly you're paddling,
doing all sorts of ridiculous stuff. I know, and like that's something that obviously that means a lot to me, and that's something that I've taken on in a very big way for my own life. And I look at what those goals mean to me and how they spark not only that motivation within myself, but it can actually bring other people along for the ride, which they like. That's the thing about the paddle in Hawaii is it started off with the selfish goal of me being like, I want to paddle the Molokai.
Yeah.
But then you bring so many other people along with you for that journey that you think that they're better off because of that experience as well, which I think is pretty amazing. But it's something that I've kind of been trying to focus on a little bit more, is how you can get other people to not necessarily follow along, but to lead in their own sort of way of having their own goals and their own ideas of what they want to do. And I mean, not to put you on the spot, but like what's an ambitious goal for yourself at the moment that you know you can use to inspire other people?
I mean, there's so many things I'm trying to work on at the moment. One is just to get better and better at comedy. I set myself the goal of hopefully one day being able to sell out the Enmore Theatre. That would have been one of my dreams.
Awesome.
Hopefully getting a book deal in the near future. I know that wasn't your dream. And maybe, I mean, turning this podcast into a success is certainly something that I'm passionate about. I love being able to come in here every week and talk to interesting people about their crazy lives and how they've gone through shit and come through the other side. These are all things that I do as essentially hobbies right now. I work a day job during the day to pay the bills, and then these things are things I do essentially for no money because I dream that one day they can turn into something. Right? And that's cool. That's pretty much my whole life. I don't have. Luckily, I'm not married. I don't have any kids, so this is my
you got
entire
the time
life.
for it. You got the dedication
exactly.
for it. Yeah.
So I spend 4 or 5 nights a week doing stand-up comedy, and for me, there's no bigger rush than just going to rooms of strangers and trying to make them laugh, make their life a bit better.
See, I can't imagine how amazing that would feel. Like I try and throw a couple of random one-liners out there. It always feels good to get a few giggles.
A couple of singers, yeah.
I can't imagine what it would be like to be like, I want to go out there and make people laugh for 15, 20 minutes straight. Yeah. It's so different to what I do.
Yeah. And sometimes you miss.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes it's 10 minutes and there's not a lot of laughs. So
just 10 minutes of torture.
Yeah.
But I think it's cool to hear that you've got those goals though. And like I'm guessing that's something you've probably vocalized before.
Yes.
But I think it's great it's something that as much as it has gotten me in trouble in the past of vocalizing what I want to do, because I would be much better off not having paddled the Molokai for my body and the torture that was than having done it. But I did it because I named it, and then there were people that were like, hey, I can help you with that. And like maybe just by saying it now, you'll have one person be like, well, here's someone I know that can help with this, or maybe it
increases your level of accountability.
Yeah.
Once you've named it, it's out there in the universe.
Definitely.
And then it's like, okay, well, what are the steps we're going to do to get there?
Yeah. Which I think is incredible. And it's something I've try to do to a few people recently. I've put them on the spots and see what their goals are. I find it interesting because people always come back with different stuff, and some people take it far more like lightly than others. Others will take it
I
pretty
made this
deeply,
mistake. You just give me a flashbacks to a time I was pissed with mates, and we drunkenly said we should do the Hawkesbury Classic as a 111-kilometre kayak race.
Okay.
And we drunkenly said, we should all do it. And the next day, one of the guys like sobered up and followed up with everyone. And next thing you know, we were training for this 111-kilometre kayak race. And I was like, this is a terrible idea.
But that's the accountability.
But we named
thing.
it, yeah. And I was like, God, why do we have to say it out loud? Yeah. So,
but whether you want it or not, it happened.
Yeah, it happened. Yeah. So, awesome. Well, Brett, thank you so much for coming on Shit's Gone Sideways and sharing your story. If anyone has Stan, they can check out Attacking Life.
Yeah.
right? It's only on stand at the moment.
Only on stand in Australia. We're still working on the overseas stuff, but yeah, only on stand in Oz.
Great. And you're available for speaking opportunities all across Australia?
Yep.
If the money's
yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's nice to travel and go see places. So it's something that I love to do. So if there's ever opportunities, I'm always happy to follow
Where
up.
can people find more information about you? What's your website?
My website is just brettconnellan.com. Well, with the W's at the front. But
Yep. And it's Connellan, Connellan.
Nailed it. See, you've got the pronunciation, you've got the spelling. That's far more than many people got during my surfing career. Over the loudspeaker, it was always awful.
That's why I get paid the big bucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time, mate. It was great to have you on.
Man, thank you so much.
Cheers, brother.